real quick here. Today, we're going to be discussing, I'm with Tony Pace, we're going to be discussing take charge of your listing. So we've not had a class like this before. And this is more the technical side of taking a listing, preparing a listing, and so forth. So any suggestions that you guys have after the class is done, we'd love to hear it so we can build it in. If there's things that we didn't discuss or go over, there's a lot of content. So first and foremost, yes, this is being recorded. We're saving this so you guys can review it later. Jewel, my assistant, will go and index it as well. Indexing it on YouTube means that we're going to upload the whole file, and then she'll put time placeholders in there. So if you want to jump to a certain section to get a quick reference of what Tony and I are going to be discussing, you can do that. So she'll put that in there, give her a couple of days to be able to do that. We'll make the slides available for you if need be. But yeah, let's get started. So we're going to do some housekeeping stuff. Hey, Tony, you're ready to go, right? Whenever we're launching. So I'm going to talk about some housekeeping stuff, if that's okay with you. Jump in anytime. Okay, cool. So we're going to go through a couple of things. We got a bunch of new agents that are with us, which is a wonderful thing. So let me jump into that. So if you see these agents around the market center or the virtual market center in, in Zoom classes like we're in right now, welcome them to the company. Alicia, Candace, I think I've seen some of you in here. Carrie Ann, Chris, it's already off to an unbelievable start. Chloe, David, welcome David. I think I saw David on here. Don, Jesse, I saw Jesse on here. Julie, I saw you on here. Mike, Roy, Tori, welcome to KW. You're part of a good bunch. You should feel very proud of the company that you joined. If there's anything that you need help-wise, don't hesitate to reach out to the ALC or leadership. We're here to help you on this journey. And part of that is participating in classes like this to better your skill set and be better prepared to assist your clients. Also, congratulations to the top producers. So this list here, look at that. We got our very own Tony Pace on the very top there. Tony had an unbelievable month. Great job, Tony. If you see these top producing agents, congratulate them on a job well done. Couple of updates. And, you guys may not have known this, but Tony and I worked very hard to create some templates for you guys in Zipforms. And so I highly recommend going in there and taking a look. And how this can benefit you is on the listing side or on the buy side. We've pre-completed and added to that some of the forms that are needed, as well as the language that's needed on there. So while you still have some things to fill in, a lot of the work is already done for you. If you don't see this, so if you go into Zipforms and you see the template section that's highlighted there in green, if you click on that and on your Zipforms you don't see anything, that means you're not linked up to the KW library. It's an easy fix. We'll get Carrie, who is our tech trainer here at the Market Center, to get in contact with you and get your Zipforms linked up. But trust me when I tell you, this is going to make your life so much easier. So if you click on listing, it'll import the listing agreement. It'll import the MLS prop type. It'll also import all the addenda that you're going to need. If you are writing a contract and you click on conventional buyer, it's going to have the language in there, the amount of minimum days for as far as a standard goes, all the addenda that's in there too. So it just makes your life that much easier. In addition, because I think some of you guys are not using this to the full extent as well, in that template section, if you notice, right there underneath templates, it says clauses on the left-hand side there. If you click on that, Tony and I have also written a lot of the clauses so you don't have to create them yourself. So we don't encourage or recommend that you create clauses. You're not an attorney, neither are we, but we review them together and with attorneys if necessary. So these are all KW approved clauses that are in there. So don't invent your own, just go to the clause library and pull them, and you can copy and paste it into your contract. So templates are in there for listings, for purchase contracts, as well as clauses. It should make your life so much easier. So please, when you can, use them. All right. Then some news and updates. Tony and I, we're just going to give some examples of things that, from a broker perspective, of what we're seeing recently. So hopefully this might help you in some of the things you're dealing with. And by the way, If I'm referencing, I'm not using names or agents' names. So if I'm referencing you and you're on this call, trust me, and I'm not going to call you out. Don't worry. This is really just for collaboration and learning together. J3 final walkthrough scenario. This has come up, which I think is an interesting one. So as you guys know, that's on the purchase side when we're writing an offer. Our KW standard to protect the buyer as best as we can is to have 5 days in J3, right? And give me Tony, if you don't mind, give me a reason as to why we lean towards 5 days.
Normally, like 48 hours prior to closing, documents already secured, conveyances, and the loan's already been funded. So if you've got less than 5 days and you're on a 3-day weekend and you do your final walkthrough like on a Saturday, it's too late to pull recording already. Or if you do it on Friday, it's too late to pull recording. And your only recourse really is to execute J4 as far as any items that come up, and it's too late for your buyer. And we just had a situation that we're getting involved in where there were some things that weren't done in accordance with J3, and I'm not really sure where it's going to go, but it does create a problem somewhere down the road. So every time Chad and I talk about these items in the contract, we're seeing complaints firsthand, and we pass it on to you. So J3 should never be less than 5 days.
Yeah. So what the whole point of what Tony's referring to is it gives the buyer and the buyer's agent, which if it would be you if you're writing the contract on the buy side, is an opportunity to react if you see something that's unacceptable, no more damage or repair that you guys have agreed on that wasn't done, or whatever the case is, to actually respond and either get it resolved, get a remedy, do a withholding or whatever it is. So it gives you that buffer, that enough time to react. And in some cases, you might need to have another inspection of some sort, whether it's a roofer, if it's a roof issue, or a plumber, or whatever the case is. So that 5 days gives you that time frame. With that being said, here's the interesting thing is what happens, guys. I'm just curious. I'm going to throw it out there. Feel free to in the chat or unmute yourself. But what happens if you do? So if you put 5 days, which again is the KW standard, 5 days for J3, but you do your walkthrough for sake of time, or you're kind of reaching out to the listing agent, say, hey, when can I do the walkthrough? And they say, hey, Thursday, and it happens to be 3 or 4 days instead of 5 days. What happens in that scenario? Anyone? You can come off of mute, or you can throw it in the chat.
They've already signed closing documents, most likely.
That's one thing. Sure, they could have. What else? Anyone? Don't make me call the agent whose broker number is 00001. That's Tony, by the way. That's a Tony joke. Tony, what happens if the buyer does their walkthrough in 3 days as opposed to the 5 days that it states in the contract?
J3 is waived. If you do it less than 5 days, you've already waived your J3. So you don't have any recourse if there's anything wrong.
Guys, that's huge. That's a huge thing that we have to make sure that we pay attention to. So it's not so much just to put 5 days on there and then just assume that we're protected, but we have to be able to respond within that time frame. Otherwise, the buyer's rights are completely waived. So what that means is it's really important for you guys on the buy side to keep your finger on the pulse in terms of the time frame of your transaction. What we want to do and what's important for the buyer on the buy side is different than the seller on the listing side. And so if you are reaching out to the listing agent saying, hey, we're going to do our J3, and they push back to a date that's outside of that 5-day mark, don't do that. Because I'm not saying they're trying to do something malicious, but they could inadvertently be pushing you and creating an opportunity where your buyer no longer has any rights. So you should be either extending that time frame or react by way of an amendment, or reacting in some response to ensure that you're doing it within 5 days. So that's super important. Dean asks Tony about the final SAT waiver.
What about it?
What about it, Dean? You're talking about when you pull it so that you can't, the thought process being that you can't close without it?
Yeah, I guess from the standpoint of if, I mean, of course, to your point already, we don't want to that J3 to lapse, but how about in the case of, again, we don't want to go there, but if it does lapse and then say the buyer said, okay, we're not going to sign the final stat waiver, so that escrow will release funds.
I'm going to give my opinion on it, and then I'll let the far more experienced and seasoned Tony respond. But in my opinion, the two are related but not. Meaning, one of them, you could push an issue for not having that stat waiver completed, but that's an escrow. That's a third party document. That's not part of our real estate contract, and so therefore it doesn't restore the actual rights that are provided within the contract. So, if you have both, that's great. If you did your final walkthrough and you're and within 5 days and you've withheld the SAT waiver as a point of negotiation to try to resolve some issues, and then you're probably using the SAT waiver in the right way. But if you bypass, if you've gone beyond it, you did it in day 3 or day 4, not within a time frame whereby the buyer has no rights based upon the agreement, and you're using the SAT waiver as that kind of final protection, I think that you've misused it or misunderstood that you haven't restored the buyer's rights. But Tony, what do you think on that scenario?
Well, also, if you're using the satisfaction waiver, to get funds withheld into escrow, you also have to submit, copies of invoices for the work that needs to be completed. So you just can't arbitrarily say, hey, go ahead and withhold $5,000 from the seller's proceeds because there's a broken faucet or there's some electrical issues. Like, you have to have all that stuff all prepared to go. Otherwise, escrow is going to take their instructions from, both the buyer and seller, which is an agreement. So, if you have everything, all the documentation in order, then you can go ahead and try and get some funds withheld and get released to your buyer. You can't do that if you don't have enough time to regroup.
Okay, thank you. Good point. Yeah, I just was always curious about like that. And I guess to your point, we just don't want the J3 to expire. We want to be in compliance on the buyer side of things. Thank you.
Kim, you had a question?
Yeah, so that extension that you mentioned, is that the one-time extension or is this a separate extension?
So the extension could be, it could be a lot of things, but I would recommend, depending on the circumstance, you can create an amendment. So Tony brought up a great point the other day when we were discussing this class and this issue is, don't assume that an extension just extends everything and all rights. Like, you got to be very, very specific that you're extending the closing date, but you're also extending, either J3 or whatever it is. So an amendment that you're creating should be reviewed and thought through with the help of your BIC so that you can help structure what things specifically that you're extending. So don't just assume that F3A, for instance, is going to move all parts. It could. It depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Tony, you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, we've seen some standard addendums come back from other companies, in the purchase contracts, and you have to be really diligent in reviewing those, because one of them states that if the closing date is extended, and it extends all timelines of the contract, which have not been met yet. And there was also one I saw the other day that if you're J1, you're J3, or whatever the contingency is, falls on a weekend, it's automatically extended to the next business day. So you have to be diligent in what you're taking a look at before you have your client sign anything, especially if you're on the side.
Hey, Tony, by the way, unlock your door. Hannah's going to go in there and help you with your mic. Your mic's cutting in and out. I'm going to move on to the second section, which is the lender adding F2, F3A for total closing costs. I've seen this come up a number of times where you're on the buy side, you're writing a contract, and let's say you have a 30-day closing, but you have 15 days for F3A. I've seen it where a lender will go, oh, you have 45 days to close. That is absolutely 100% not correct. You could have a total of 45 days, but there's a lot of the F3A is a little bit of a moving target, meaning there could be a scenario whereby the other side meaning the listing side, uses that F3A, therefore the buyer can't use it. And if they use it and use 1 day, well, using 1 day is the same as using 15 days in the structure of the purchase contract. So whereby they burn F3A altogether. So I say that because when you guys are working with a lender, make sure that you are having a discussion with them as to when they can close, like when their actual closing time is. And hopefully you're working with a lender that will work backwards, working backwards, meaning that they understand where the close date is supposed to be. And then so many days before that, they need to know that they got to fund, and how many days before that they got to sign. And before that, they got to have the appraisal back and conditional underwrite. And they're working backwards to that date, not like credit unions often do, which is they just take it and kind of throw it in underwriting, and it takes 2 or 3 weeks to underwrite. You want to make sure that you're working with that lender. They understand our contract, which is F2 is the closing date. Forget F3. F3 is used when we need to for negotiation purposes, but don't let a lender trick you into thinking that is the combination of F2 and F3 is what that closing date is. That is not the case. So just be cautious of that. Lastly, E3, and this has come up actually a few times recently, which is same thing again, which is involving a lender, and the lender. So E3 is, if you guys notice on E2, there's all the inclusions, and one of the things that's on there, it says owned PV, and then E3 has what would appear to be leased PV is kind of the argument. And it's not, it's just additional documents. So it says lease systems or alarms and other items as well. So the reason why we always say, if you have an owned system, check owned PV system in E2, but also check E3, is that so you can get any documents relating to the PV system. It could be a maintenance agreement. It could be a warranty. It could be the net metering agreement. It could be a lot of different documents that the seller may have possession of, that they need to, for the best interest of your buyer, that they provide to you in a timely fashion. That's the reason why we need it. The solution that we had most recently with, and I'm going to talk to the agent who's on the class today, if it worked or not, is that I guess the lender was pushing back because the lender didn't want it in there. Here's the thing. The lender doesn't have the fiduciary responsibility that we do to protect our client. So it's kind of like they need to stay in their lane, and we're certainly in our lane. But the solution could be a strike through on the word leased in E3. It could be adding more clarifying information in section Q, which your broker can help you structure. But I don't want to have any lender or third party dictate or determine or influence how the contract is written, because it's easier for them to underwrite when it's us that's going to be responsible if something goes sideways on how that shows up later. You know, if a year from now, if the seller or the buyer rather is unhappy with the purchase, they're not going to go to the lender and say, well, the lender had you remove this for sake of underwriting, but they're going to come to us as agents. So make sure that we write it the right way to protect them. So hopefully that answers that. So what's the point of today's goal? If it exceeds, an hour, which it probably will. So around 10:30, we'll take a short 7-minute break, and then we'll come back. But we're going to get a better understanding of preparation of the listing. We're going to go through the listing agreement as well as any necessary supporting documents. We're going to talk about some strategies on pre-listing, MLS, showing time, and some resources. Like always, we always put this in here. Please take notes. Notes are really, really important to better understand how to better your skill set in serving our clients. And again, leadership, your coaches, your BICs and your brokers are all here for you to help. So if you need one-on-one, or you want to ask some questions, or you have a specific scenario, just reach out to me after the class, and I'm happy to help you. Stephanie, your comment earlier about it's hard to hear. Is it hard to hear me, or were you referring to Tony?
Oh, I was talking about Tony.
Okay.
Tony, yeah, but it's fixed. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. So here's what we're going to go through. Again, it's pretty technical. So I apologize in advance. I'm not trying to put anyone to sleep here, but it is very necessary information because we see it wrong all the time on Tony and I's side, as well as some of the other BICs. So here's what we're going to go through. We're going to talk about pulling the property data from various different sources. This is in preparation for your listing. So MLS, if it's a listing that you're going to want to pull MLS from the previous listing for the subject property. You can either go to Hawaii Information Services or Realist to pull some property information. You're going to go to the tax assessor's site. You're going to order a prelim, order a net sheet. Then you have some listing presentation options and what you can put in that presentation. And then, of course, comps. We'll talk about pre-listing packets. Have you guys ever heard of that or not? It's something that we'll chat about. And make sure that there's some tidbits. Is make sure that the person you're speaking with in the conversation leading up to the listing presentation, that's the person that's either on title or has power of attorney or is an authorized decision maker. And you have to be very careful if the property is in a trust or if it's in an LLC or a corporation, or if it's a married couple that is in the process of getting divorced. That's literally a hard stop. If you hear that, come talk to your broker, because that can put us in a very liable situation. So first and foremost, when you're preparing the listing, you're going to go to the MLS. You're going to put the property address in, just as it's listed there, and you're going to click on sold because you're looking for it's sold data if there is any, and you're going to put 0 and then nothing. So it pulls up everything, all history of that property. And you will see this as a result. You'll see how many times that same property, it's all the same property, has been sold. And then you can go through it and you can see the various different stages. You can see different remarks on it. You can see the photos or conditions or upgrades. So it gives you a better idea of what happened, who it was listed with, the time frames it was sold. You can also look at the history of it being listed and maybe withdrawn as well, if you want to look at it from that perspective. That'll give you an idea of, I know I do that. I don't know, Tony, if you do that, but if I have a client that says that they've tried to list with a couple of other agents, while that's fine. That's not a red flag for me, but it's something that's curious to me, and I want to find out who. I mean, have they used like 2 realtors every single year to list every 6 months, kind of thing? If that's the case, I may not want to take that listing at all. So I look at things like that. But here's the sold information, and then when the results pop up, you can get an idea of the sales history on that property, and you can click through all the MLS data. As far as, well, I'm not going to get into Hawaii Information Service because we're talking about either or. And in this case, Realist is readily available through the MLS. It's free. So this is where you would click on that information. So on the opening screen on High Central, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that. You're going to click on Realist and it'll bring you to this dashboard. You'll put the property address in, it'll pop up. And here's the information that you can find on Realist. So that's a screenshot of what it looks like. But why is it important? You can get the owner information, you can get flood zone information, you can get the TMK and legal description, you can get the tax assessment information, the characteristics of the property, building permits, features, listing information, last market sales history, mortgage history, property map, and then you can get links to tax records. So it kind of links you around to other things that you're going to need as well. So I would say that in my experience, while government information and public information is not 100% accurate, I would say it's pretty close. Very rarely do I see it completely off, but that's why we check. I personally will kind of look at either a combination of Realist and the tax assessment information, or Hawaii Information Service and the tax assessment information as to square footage, bedroom count, and that sort of thing. So when you click on that little circle, that red circle, the TMK, and for new agents, the TMK is the map key, which is kind of like the social security number of the property. So it's unique to that property. And when you click on it, it pulls up your Honolulu Tax Assessor profile. And so, I mean, you can find it by just Googling Honolulu Tax Assessor's office and searching it that way. But if you click on the TMK through Realist, it brings you there automatically, which is a huge time saver. So what other information is available through this page? You can see right there is the plat map. So if you click on the plat map, that's what pulls up. You can see in reference to the subject property where it is on that plat. You can also see the parcel map. And if you click on that, It'll show you a satellite view of the property. These are all things, by the way, that I do recommend that you print out in going to a listing presentation. It just shows how prepared you are when you're sitting in front of the client. I will tell you, whenever I've competed in for a listing, most of the agents I'm competing with from other companies are talking about themselves rather than spending time talking about the property and talking about the sellers. Kim, did you have a question?
Yeah, so if you had conflicting information on square footage, let's say, would one source be more reliable than the other? Or would you just say, let's just say the lower square footage so that you don't get sued later because they say like, oh, this is 10 less than we measured and it's 10 less than what you listed for. So now we're going to sue you.
If you have conflicting information, I would probably lean with Realist or Hawaii Information Services, but I would look at both. So if you have conflicting information, look at both Hawaii Information Service and Realist to find out if their information is consistent versus Honolulu Tax Assessor. But you can also dig a little bit deeper. And this is where it's not a solid answer because this is where your BIC can come in and help you is we would probably start looking and seeing if there's any permit information. If there's open permits, that's probably why there's a conflict in square footage. And then we might have some disclaimer information that we would ask you to put on there. But we would always lean to be conservative because we don't want, like to your point, we don't want to create a liability and have a lawsuit later. If you click here or you see that red circle, it'll say how to calculate your property taxes. A lot of people don't know how taxes are even calculated to begin with. So when you click on that, it gives you the breakdown, $3.50 per thousand of assessed value. And for new agents, assessed value is not market value. They move in the same direction, but they are not consistently the same thing. So the assessed value is what the county will assess it for sake of taxes, and market value is what someone's willing to pay for the property. So in a market that's a hot market, that's a moving market, the market value typically leads assessed value anywhere between 5 to 15%. In a soft market or a softening market, and this was the case in California when I practiced in California for a while. When the market softened, it was a different direction. So the property taxes were here, and market value was lower, and everyone who would buy a property would immediately complain to the county assessor's office and say, "Hey, this guy sold his home for $100,000 less. Can I lower my value?" So it's like everyone's complaining about something. They either want their home to be the most expensive in market value, or they want to pay the least amount in taxes. Here's a good thing with Hawaii is I think that we are number 2 in the country for the lowest property taxes. So we're super inexpensive. If you've not been anywhere outside of Hawaii, then you may not know that, but trust me, as Kim's shaking her head, California, right? California is super expensive.
My house, when I bought it, was 310, and my taxes based on that assessment is double of $1 million house in Hawaii.
Yeah. So the good and the bad is it's 1.25% in California, but they have what's called Prop 13. So they only increase it by 2% a year instead of reassessing.
Did they do away with Prop 13 already?
They're trying.
No, but that's only on the main assessment. There are additions because it's gone up $2,000 since I bought the place.
I was at one point when I had paid off most of my my mortgage in California, my property taxes was more than my mortgage. It was crazy. It's absolutely insane. So Hawaii has absolutely great property taxes. Just know that, especially when you're dealing with investors or people who are buying second homes, just so that they know. But anyways, here's how that calculation works. You can find all that. You can provide that to. That's a great resource to provide to potential buyers too. If you click on this Department of Permit, the DPP, it'll take you to this, which is all the information on that property that shows up. Now, that's not a full permit package, but it's what's available that's being linked over with the tax assessor information. So it's still helpful. It's free. You can print that out and have some sort of resource to look at. Also, that's available on the tax assessor site is the improvement information, which is really helpful because it'll break down specifically what it is that they may have done. So when you're talking to them about the improvements that they've made, you can use this as a little bit of a blueprint to guide your conversation. residential additions, as you can see there, sketches, building and other improvements and permit information as well. Sales information, current tax bill. And here's the historical tax information on that subject property. And then, so we've gone through MLS, we've gone through the Hawaii Information Services or Realist. We've gone through Honolulu Tax Assessor. These are the items of things that you're going to need in your listing presentation, or certainly to have to upload on a new listing. And then you're also going to want to order a prelim. So you guys can use whomever you want to use, but a lot of new agents will say, well, how do I order a prelim? Just literally type an email and order the prelim. So put the property address in there and ask for that prelim to be sent to you. And it usually takes, depending on who that escrow officer is, it usually takes anywhere from 1 day, sometimes as long as 7 to 8 days if it's a unique situation or something that is a little bit of a hindrance on the property. There are some escrow officers or escrow companies that have an automated ordering service through an app or their website. So this is just a one way that you can do that. Here's the other thing that I recommend always. I'm a big proponent, and I know Tony is as well, of just planning ahead and making sure that, my escrows and my listings never fell apart because I set the proper expectations. And what that means is, one thing you never want to do is allow a seller to walk into a scenario where they don't even know what their proceeds are. And how you avoid that is based on some comps or just on some general estimates, I would order something called a net sheet. And a net sheet is what the seller will walk away with in terms of proceeds. And there's two versions of it that I typically use. This one is in preparation for listing. So this is information that I have. Information that I have might be based on comps. It's not based on me physically in the property yet. So I might change that around a little bit based on upgrades or condition. But I kind of get an idea. And the reason why I do it at 880, 890, and 900 in this scenario is I'm kind of ballparking it. So I'm like, hey, worst case scenario, we'll put on the market, we'll get 880, or on the higher side, 900. That's a moving target that you can be in control of. Then I break down the fees. So here's what it's going to be: standard title, owner occupied, the seller's a veteran, because there's different discounts at different escrow companies. Here's what the total commissions are, and break down each side. Here's some of the seller anticipated costs are, and I send that over to escrow. Now, one thing that's missing in here, if you guys notice, because again, I don't have this information, I may not have this information this early on, but I don't know what the mortgage is. So if they have a mortgage balance, that's clearly not represented in there because I don't know it yet at this stage. When I do have that information, I absolutely send that over to the escrow officer. They'll get a more accurate amount and put that in there, because now there is zero concern or question about what the proceeds are that a seller might walk away with. And it's just, again, it's super, super helpful to get ahead of things like this. The other thing when I've spoken to sellers about, especially like maybe military or a first-time home buyer that is thinking about not selling and thinking about renting, our job is to provide information and also to explain potential risk and pitfalls. One thing that I would absolutely consider doing in here that as you notice is not in here because it says owner occupied, but if this was a veteran, a VA that's being PCS'd out, and they're telling me, hey, we might consider selling or we might consider renting, what's one thing that I should put in here to better illustrate what their path looks like in the future? That one thing would be HARPTA. So that HARPTA fee, I would have them include in there, because that changes everything. Like that gives them a snapshot into the future of what is HARPTA, Tony, right now? Is it 8.25? I think it's 8.25% of the total sale amount, right?
Yeah, 8.25.
Yeah, so that's huge. Not 8.25 of the proceeds, mind you. It's 8.25 of the sale amount. That's so huge. And by putting that in there, and you're not an accountant, so you're going to say, please consult your CPA or accountant on the tax, your own specific tax situation. But just know that this is the thing that is being taken out as required for a non-resident seller. So it's, if you're a foreign investor, it's FERPTA, which is an even higher rate. or the most common one is a non-Hawaii resident, which is HARPTA. This would be for the sale of an investment property. So if they're asking you information on selling it as owner occupied, HARPTA doesn't apply. But if they're saying, hey, I'm also considering the possibility of renting it out in the future, you want to explain that, worst case scenario, this is what that future could look like. So talk to your CPA to get a better idea of what that is. However, you could also be hit with these fees that are illustrated here under the fee section, but also 8.25%, which is a huge amount. So let me see here. Okay, Lisa's monitoring. Am I still Candace? I'm cutting in and out. How's my my sound?
Not for me. I hear you
No?
fine.
Okay. All right. And so when they send you the breakdown, that net sheet, this is what it's going to look like. So this is a simple one. Obviously, as I mentioned before, they'll break it down. You see on the very top, it says 880. So you can break it down. I usually do. I think Tony does the same thing, 2 or 3 versions of it, depending on price point. This one's 880. They'll have taxes in there. They'll have the listing side, the selling side. By the way, new agents get this confused all the time. Selling side is the buyer's agent, not the listing agent. People think the listing and selling agent are the same agent. It's not. Listing agent is the person that's listing the property for sale. Buyer's agent or listing agent is selling agent or buyer's agent is the same thing. So it's broken down there. Then you have the title fees, you have the recording fees, the payoff of mortgage, as you know, is blank, as I've mentioned before. That's just going into the equation is to see what the proceeds are. And then, I bring this information with me when I go to the presentation, the listing presentation. As far as listing presentations go, so we covered the property data information and where to get that. Again, you're going to need that when you do the presentation. You're also going to need that for sake of compliance and gathering that information and where to put that, and that you can upload all that stuff into Command once you get started. But on the listing side, there are so many resources that KW have. So if you have your own listing presentation already that you're using that you're happy with, no problem. Keep using that same thing. But in addition, we have templates. So in Command, and Carrie, I think, is on here too. Carrie can help you with that. But there are, and I just did a simple search, there are all kinds of things that you can pull in to create your own custom listing presentation. Here's the other cool thing too. If you came from another firm and you had a listing presentation that you liked better at that other firm in a PDF format, if you upload that in here, it can take apart the layers of the PDF. So all you got to do is just take out logos and you can insert our logo in its place. So you can do all kinds of customization using that feature in Command, which is really nice. The other thing is, I don't know if I get into it yet. So here it is. So if you were interested in a pre-listing packet, I used to use them. I recommend it. I just did a quick search in KW Connect. KW Command is our CRM. It houses all the compliance information and designs and all that. KW Connect is the education side of it, the resource side of it. If you log into KW Connect, I did a search on pre-listing packet and a ton of stuff came up. So I just clicked on one of them, which is there. It also has a YouTube link as well. But what is a pre-listing packet? A pre-listing packet is if you've made an appointment to do a listing presentation with someone. Let's say that I had a call today. I'm doing lead gen. I get someone on the phone. I have a listing appointment set for next Friday. What I would do typically is I would create a pre-listing packet and I would either drop that packet off or send that packet. I wouldn't email it. Some people do. I don't recommend doing that because it seems a little lazy and kind of misses the point of going above and beyond, but that's up to you. But a pre-listing packet is you're kind of, assuming that person is shopping around and looking at other agents, I'm trying to beat out the competition with showing how prepared I am, how much they mean to me and how much I want to earn their business. You're not giving away any secret sauce. Everyone kind of goes, well, I don't want to talk about the comps and what I'm charging. That's not the things that you're putting in there. You're putting in there the general marketing things, who we are as a company, those kind of things. And then when you show up for the actual listing presentation, this is why it's important to figure out if you're going to do a pre-listing presentation as well as our pre-listing packet along with the listing presentation. If you do, you have to separate those two documents and what's going to be in each one, versus if you're not going to do the pre-listing and only do the listing, then you'll kind of have everything together. But I will tell you, regardless of what route you go, make it about them. They should be the hero of the story. I've sat in and shadowed some agents before and in doing listing presentations, and I can't tell you, I think the biggest mistake that agents make inadvertently is making it about them. Like they'll walk in and they'll go, I'm the top agent here and I did this many sales and I'm the best here and I won this award and I won that award. That's make your elevator pitch, so to speak, 15 seconds. Like that's all that I've been doing this for this a long amount of time. I'm with KW, the best company for real estate. But more importantly, let's talk about and then you immediately jump into what their goals and priorities are and seeing their home, and you'll see their faces completely light up when they're talking about them. They're talking about what their goals are, what their plans are. Are they selling just to rent? Are they selling to relocate? Are they buying someplace else? Oh, you're moving. You're PCSing to Tennessee. Fantastic. I have agents in Tennessee. Part of the service that I have is I'll interview them for you and find you the agent that's a right fit. Would that be helpful to you? So you're controlling all aspects of it. Oh, you're doing a 1031 exchange. Wonderful. I'm great at doing 1031 exchange. It's really important to ensure that the agent that we're cooperating with on the other side also is experienced in 1031 exchange. So I'll help you find one that we can work with to ensure that we have a smooth transaction, because 1031 is so time sensitive and such a sense of urgency that we want to make sure the agent opposite of this transaction on the other, either replacement property side of it, or that they understand the timeline that we're working within as well. So I kind of make them, the hero of the story. You can go either route, pre-listing packet or just a listing presentation, but I highly recommend that you consider a pre-listing packet. The most effective one is one that you drop off. So if I have a listing next Friday, I'll just tell them, hey, can I drop off some information for you over the weekend or over the next couple of days, and I would just drop it off. And in there, what I would put in there is a form of what you love about the property the most. Like, what's your favorite things about this home? Because then now you're talking about them, about the subject that they want to talk about. And also when you show up for the listing presentation, it makes your presentation that much easier, because they hopefully have already wrapped their head around some ideas and concepts, especially some forms that you're going to need as to what they love about their property the most. So you can focus in on and hone in on those kinds of things. But I can have a whole separate conversation about the listing presentation and how that works. But that, just to give you some information, there's tons of data on KW Connect, as well as with Carrie and YouTube as well. As far as comps go, comps are kind of, Tony, I'm sure that you would agree, it's a little bit of a art and science. It's not as definitive. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes. One of the things that I do when I do the comps, I also pull out the type of financing that was taken down, if it was cash, because that way you can kind of prepare a seller that, hey, it may be a VA buyer, it may be a USDA, it may be all cash. Because they're going to ask you, like, I'm going to listing appointments, and they're going to ask me, like, what kind of buyer is more than likely going to buy my property? If you research, the comps for like the last 6 months, you'll be able to pinpoint that down for them.
And I think Tony brings up a great point too, is in the listing presentation, one of the things that I would also know and make mention of too is who the demographic is that are potential buyers. So, you can kind of create that pie chart, so to speak, of who the buyer is going to be. I mean, if you have a property that is a long-term lease, then what you do know is it's not going to be owner occupied. It's certainly not going to be FHA, VA, or USDA, because those are all owner occupied buyers. So you might be marketing specifically to investors or 1031 exchange. And that's helpful to know, because the last thing that you want is to walk in and say, hey, this property is tenant occupied in a long-term lease for the next 12 months. And then you're talking about how you're going to find a VA buyer. That shows that you don't know what you're talking about. So you want to make sure that you understand what you can and can't do, who the demographic is too. But another thing that Tony just reminded me of in terms of finding that right demographic, that right buyer, is in Command, you can do social media and Facebook ads to different demographics. So if you run, there's a report that you can run, and Carrie can probably chime in on the chat and tell you, but there's you can see the referral patterns of who's coming and going and where the referrals are coming from. And you can market to certain areas. So for instance, I'll give you an example. If I had a luxury property, beachside property in Kahala, my demographic might not be clearly a first-time home buyer. It certainly might not be a VA buyer or things like that, but it might come from some other place. So I might do some social media advertising marketing on Facebook to Northern California, to some parts of Southern California, maybe South Korea, but, you know, some areas that I know that those are where the buyers will be. So I'm doing ads specific to the demographic of potential buyers. That's super, super powerful. So you should absolutely know who your potential buyers and demographics are for each property. With regards to the comps, though, sold comps, as you can see on the right-hand side, everything that's in red with that S as a status on there is sold. Sold has far more weight than anything else, than active listings or in escrow, what have you. But an appraiser will look at the overall data. It's just that the sold data by far and away has more weight. When you're pulling comps, you want to go as close to chronological and geographical as to the subject property. So, you know, some people go, well, this property sold down the street 3 years ago for X amount of dollars. That's too far. That's too far time-wise away. As close to sell as property in both distance as well as time and condition, of course. And then they do something called adjustments. So if you have a 5-bedroom property and you're the only 5-bedroom property in the entire neighborhood, number one, it's what we refer to as being overbuilt in that area. It kind of stands out like a sore thumb. You don't want to have the nicest home in the neighborhood. And then they're going to have to do something called an adjustment, which gives you credit to properties. So if it's only 4 bedrooms and you're the 5th bedroom, the only one that's on there, they're going to give a credit or an adjustment to add a little bit of value to it. But if you want to know how to do comps a little bit better, guess what? I just took this class and it's a pretty good class. It's through High Central. If you go to highcentral.com and you click on the member site, it pulls and you click on the calendar, it will allow you to search for all different kind of classes that become available. Some of them have costs, some of them don't. This is learning CMAs, so comparative market analysis. And there are ones for this month, the next, and December. So I highly recommend.
Does that fulfill my CE requirement?
Some of these have CE. So there are Core A, Core B, which is the required, I think I forgot which one it is that's not available to next June, but this would fulfill electives. So you can take, as you know, a ton of I typically take more classes than are required because I want to learn, but this does fulfill an elective credit. So what documents are needed for a listing? We talked about some of them, but here's as far as the listing documentation, it's exclusive listing agreement, the MLS prop type form, and then there's a few different ones. There's single family, there's condo, townhome, there's land, there's multifamily. Those are pretty much the 4 that you're going to be using. Then we require you to have the KW Standard Addendum. We require you to have the COVID Addendum, and it says disclosure base. I'm going to explain that in a little bit. Dual agency. How do you know it's a dual agency yet? I'm just taking the listing. We're going to explain that in a second as well. And then First Hawaii Title ABA. ABA is affiliated business arrangement disclosure. And that's disclosure based as well. And I'll explain why. So here's the listing agreement. And I'm just going to go through this pretty quick. Here's the good news, in my opinion, with the listing agreement versus the purchase contract. Purchase contract is kind of complicated. It's a little bit of a chessboard. And there's a lot of moving parts to it. I don't think there's nearly as much liability on the listing agreement side than there is on the purchase contract side, but you still have to know what it is and what you're doing. So a couple of things that I see people miss all the time is make sure on the very top there's an X where it says brokerage firm is a realtor on the very, very top. People miss that all the time. Authorized representative title is for trusts or LLCs or POAs. If it's a single seller, which is most often the case, you don't need to put anything in that section. What documents are needed for a listing? So we're going to move forward on A4. A4, we encourage you to try to take a listing for 12 months. This is obviously a negotiation, so it's not a requirement by any means, but I do see, and every strategy is a little different. So there's some agents that do focus on for sale by owner, and that kind of strategy, they may only allow you to list for 30 to 60 days. That's understandable. I get it. But try to go longer because as that time runs out, you're going to have to either have an amendment or redo a listing agreement to extend that out. And so there's just more paperwork for you to sign. And there's just, this is different thought processes. I know Tony does it a little bit differently, but for the advance notice of termination, I typically would put in 45 to 60 days. And here's the reason why I do that is because I typically spend a lot of time, effort, and money in my marketing. And so if someone says they want to terminate the listing agreement earlier than the 12 months, but allowing to do so because I have the advance notice in there, I want a cooling down period so that they might change their mind, but also an opportunity for me to unwind some of my marketing. Because if I have it listed at like a day or two, that's, for me, that's not enough time for me to unwind some of my marketing. Whereas like Tony's strategy is, if anyone knows Tony, this is perfect for Tony. He's like, hey, if I don't want to work with you, I don't like you. I'm done with you. It's over. I can't unwind my marketing that quickly. So this is not a KW requirement so much as it is understanding what that means and how that can impact your relationship or impact your business on what you're doing. Then you have A5, the listing price. This must be completed before a BIC signs it. So I know that some of you guys send it to the brokers to sign and some of these things are blank. This thing has got to be completed. The BICs are more than happy to look at it to get an idea of if they can help you or suggest any changes or strategy. But if we're actually signing it to execute it, we got to make sure that the price and dates and all these things are in there. A7, which is the compensation. This is the commission. It should be formatted as whatever your total commission is. So 2.5% of final sales price, or 6%, which is a total, not just one side of the final sales price, with GET or no GET should be indicated on there as to what we are making in total. Again, it's not just the list side, it's the total. And then on A9, all the way in the bottom, that's the compensation to the buyer side. So that's also going to be the same number that's going to show up on the MLS as to the total compensation. A8, which is a protection period, I would recommend that you put in 90 days. So what the protection period is that once you terminate this agreement, you as a listing agent have 10 days to provide the seller with a list of potential buyers that if those potential buyers make an offer and the offer is accepted within that protection period timeframe, so within 90 days, you still make your commission on it. So when and how would that show up? Let's say that you did a ton of marketing, open houses, or you were in contact with buyers agents and offers were going back and forth and maybe negotiated but not finalized or not approved. And let's say that you had it listed for 6 months and you have a total of 12 to 20 potential buyers, and the seller cancels on you. What you want to do immediately, if you have the names of these potential buyers, is within 10 days in writing, submit to the seller the list of these names. And if they close on any of those potential buyers within that time frame, you're still going to get compensated for it. That's how that would be used. So the 90 days is, to me, an appropriate amount of time. Let me check the chat real quick.
Hey, Chad, can I interject for a quick second?
Yes, please.
If the property gets relisted with another broker, I'm not saying that the sellers wouldn't be honest, but they may not provide that list to the to the other agent that you're using. So you may want to go ahead and email that list to the exclusion list to the other agent so they know what they're getting into as well.
Yeah, that's a good cooperation. You may not know it right away if you terminate, but you're tracking the property and you pull it up and they're listed with another firm. Then what Tony's saying is email that protection list to that other agent. A10, this is additional terms. I actually have language that's already built in to the template for the listing. So if you click on listing agreement, it'll put this language already in there so you don't have to type it. But things like seller authorizes delayed MLS entry until a certain date or time frame, or seller agrees to reimburse listing agent for X amount of dollars for marketing should they cancel, or these kind of things, but are acceptable for additional terms. But at the end of the day, ask your BIC. Don't make things up because you can overcomplicate things inadvertently. A11, you have to have at minimum the following. And this has gotten a lot better over time, but I think some of you are still missing some of this stuff. So KW Standard Addendum. And if I were you, when you take the listing and you already have that, you should already put that into the supplement section of MLS. It's already there. So anyone who submits an offer to you can just download that and have the buyer sign it. The seller would have already signed it. So dual agency, COVID addendum, and first Hawaii title, those things should all be listed under A11 at minimum. There could be more, like if they're doing a 1031 exchange or some other type of applicable addenda can be on there as well. But these are the 4 that are required. So when you guys submit to Rob, who is our compliance officer, and he kicks things back and you have a listing, it's likely because you've listed something here like KW Standard Addendum or dual agency, but you didn't upload that into compliance. So if it's in here, there should be some corresponding documents to support that. That's what he's looking for. So the other thing that we need is a prop type form. I'm sure you guys have all seen this before. It comes in different forms. There's a single family, there's condo, multifamily, there's vacant land, there's a master condo, which we don't typically would use. These are the 3 most common ones. So the way that you would pull this up is through Zipforms. And if you notice on the bottom here, it says, which the screenshot of Zipforms, in that area, if you go through summary, then parties, and you fill all that out, it's going to auto-complete a lot of this stuff for you, saving you a ton of time in filling every little line item out. It'll move it over and it'll push it through every single place that the TMK shows up or the seller shows up, or all that stuff will show up on every single form. So you may want to use Zipforms to its full capability. But anyways, to the right, you'll see what that form looks like. This is the single family version of it versus the condo version. Everything that's in bold, so I'm going to kind of go in steps here. The MLS information that's highlighted in yellow, everything in bold with an asterisk is required field. So TMK is required, listing agents required, MLS is required, list price is required. Here's the thing, MLS is, while it's required, they give it to you. They, meaning the MLS, gives you that unique MLS number. It's not required to be put on here because you don't even know what it is yet at the time you're filling this out. But you got to have your list price. I get this sent to me all the time without a list price. You have to have that completed. Land recorded, excuse me, that section is referring to if it's land court regular or dual systems. You may not even know this yet if you haven't ordered the prelim, which is, I recommend that you order that ahead of time for some of this reason. Listing type is always exclusive rights. There's 2 types that you can choose. Always choose exclusive rights. Listing date is the date that you're planning to go live on the MLS. This can be changed later, or you can have it changed either in A10 by certain language, or you can change it with an amendment or addendum. Compensation is the percentage offered to the other broker. So the 2.5% as an example is standard, or 3% is common. Dual variable comp, I get this question asked all the time. That's referring to you're disclosing to the cooperating broker. So if you're on the list side, you're disclosing to the buyer's agent. If you have a lower commission to you as the listing agent, if you also procured a buyer. So it's disclosing to say, like, I'll give you an example. If you said to the seller, I'll sell your property for a total of 6%, and I'll split that with the buyer's agent. But if I bring to you a buyer, I'll only charge you a total of 5%. That would be where you would answer yes to dual variable, because I'm offering 6% to the cooperating broker in total, 3 for me, 3 for them, whatever the split looks like. But I'm giving a discount to the seller if I find the buyer myself for him, then that dual variable comp would be yes. Subject to is if the compensation could change due to other factors like court approval, lender approval, et cetera. And that would be like a lender sale, a bankruptcy sale, probate sale, those kind of things. Comp method is only used if you selected yes on dual variable. And then in that case, you would put in, what that is, if it's percent or dollar amount or whatever. Foreclosure, advertised date, auction date, foreclosure number are all related to if the property is being sold as a foreclosure. So it's not anything to do with, some people put foreclosure no, but they put in an advertised date, like they think that that's the date that they themselves as a listing agent is marketing the property. It has nothing to do with that. That's only referring to foreclosures. And if you're not doing a foreclosure, leave those 4 things completely blank. Show internet is if the listing will be shown online. I highly recommend that for maximum exposure. Explain that though in the listing presentation when you're going through that with the seller, because everyone has different goals. So if the seller has a unique situation where they say, we don't want our neighbors or friends and family to know that we're selling the property, we don't want a sign out front, you got to know these things, and they may not, in that case, want their property address to show up online as well. So again, make sure that you know what their goals are, and you can match their goals. Internet address, same thing as show internet. You're going to want to, I think that you're going to want to, if they want maximum exposure, is to make that yes. The reason is if you don't, it's just going to give you general information and not say where the property is located. So you're not going to, you almost miss the mark on exposure for sites like Zillow, Redfin, and so forth, because it's going to group it in an area. You're going to say 3-bedroom house in Eva Beach, but Eva Beach is like, there's Old Eva, there's Eva Villages, there's Huacalay. They're all different types of properties at different price points and different levels of desirability. So it's, to me, very, very important to make sure you have the address so that a potential buyer can see exactly what neighborhood or community is located in. But again, assuming that that's what the seller wants. Lockbox, self-explanatory. If there's going to be a lockbox on the property, GE paid by seller. So if you've, in your listing agreement, if it says 6% plus GE, this is where it might show up that you're also paying the buyer side GE. If it's no, then the answer would be no. Listing service is always full service, always. We're not a discount broker. We don't do list only or anything like that. So we're full service. Lockbox serial number, there are different schools of thought on this. Mine is that you should use the most secure equipment and technology that we have, which is in our case, SentryLock. We have a service that we've arranged with SentryLock. With the board for SentryLock boxes. And Carrie is helping to facilitate that. So if you have a listing, the SentryLock boxes, I think, are $150 to purchase, or they're completely free per individual use. If you fill out a form and you have access to it and you can control it, you can see who's coming in and out. You can shut that down if you don't want people to access it. So it's really, really highly recommended that you use it. You can, of course, use one that you get from Home Depot or whatever, but know that they are not as secure. You don't know who's coming in and out, and that absolutely can be hacked into. So just be aware of that. Tony brought this up the other day, which I thought was brilliant. Thank you for bringing it to my attention, Tony. So as we're talking about the show internet address portion of it, this is a snapshot or screenshot of what you see on the MLS side when you're entering this in. And his question was, should we allow comments or should we allow AVM? AVM is an automated value method, is what that stands for. My recommendation for both of them are no. And here's why. What that means is if you've selected yes, show internet, yes, show internet address, which I recommend both of them under normal circumstances. Let's say that this property is now being shown on Redfin or on Zillow. What it does is it allows comments to be seen or be made on that site, as well as for that other site to put a value on your property. Both of those things I recommend no. Here's why. Let's say AVMs or automated value methods through Zillow or Redfin or those kind of things aren't terribly accurate, right? We already know that. So let's say that you have a listing and it's 800,000 and there's tons of upgrades, and maybe you have permitted additions, so everything's good, but it's not showing up on the county records as being completely permitted, even though the seller has the permits already done. It's just not caught up yet on the public record side of it. And Zillow is saying that the value is 650, but you have it listed at 800. Well, you're completely doing yourself a disservice by having yes for comments and especially yes for AVM, because now on the public site, before they even get to calling you or get to wanting to go to the open house or get to see, this is the public now, not your seller, but this is the open public. They may be drawing a conclusion as to not wanting to see the property altogether because it's overpriced. That's immediately the first thing they're going to think. So I would say no to both of them so that they can just see the property themselves and draw their own conclusion. Moving on to the street address, it's not, you don't type the entire address 6 different times. It's literally the numerical portion, just the street number. The prefix is north, south, etc. Street name is exactly that. The suffix is place, way, street, avenue, boulevard. I mean, it's breaking it down as like as simple as possible. But I keep getting people sending me the entire address typed out like 4 or 5 different times. Schools, one of the KW policies, we do not put schools in this section at all. So just leave that entirely blank. Do not put schools in the MLS. Do not put schools in the prop type form. Do not copy information from previous listings or another similar listing. That is to me, a no-brainer. I see this happen all too often, and we have a lot of new agents coming from other firms, and I'm surprised about how many firms do exactly that, and they're okay with that. I don't recommend that because the MLS is garbage in, garbage out. So if you have an agent who put in wrong information by way of a typo, or they didn't look it up or do any enough research, and you copy that information, you're just copying inaccurate information. So do your own research and make sure that everything is accurate. And you have we went through every single place that you can get this information from. The only thing that we didn't cover is when it comes down to which we're going to get into, is the maintenance fee and association fee. Just call the association and find out, do they have any special assessments? What's the monthly fees? You can ask them things like, what is the owner occupancy, if that's needed, if it's a condo. You can get most of that information by doing your own research. It's not difficult. If you do have a breakdown on fees, you can break it down. Otherwise, you can put everything into the maintenance fees if it's a condo, or association fees if it's a single family or a PUD or a CPR. The other fees, what I would do is I'd put the other fees as special assessment if you already know what that is, especially if it's a temporary fee, because once in a while in a condo or townhome, there may be a short-term assessment of like 24 months to pay for a new elevator or new roof or whatever it is. And there's a special assessment of $36. That's one that you want to maybe break down so that a potential buyer knows that this is what the normal fee is, but then for the next 24 months, there's just $36 fee. Home exemption, that can be found in the tax assessor's information. And so here's what that looks like. Here's a screenshot of that same information that we looked at from the tax assessor site. It says a tax assessor's year, the property class, if it's residential or otherwise, what the assessed land value is, the building value, or what we call the improvement value. Then there's a total property assessed value, the total property exemption, and then the total net value. So all the information that you need is right there, all in yellow. If the property is a leasehold, make sure you have the necessary leasehold information before entering it onto the MLS. And the reason why that's important too, and it's not, again, same thing, it's not difficult to get. You just gotta ask, you gotta be prepared. There's information that you need on here. Is there like a date, a termination date of the lease? Is there a renegotiation date? Do they already know what that amount is that it's going to be changed to? But it's called a renegotiation. There's nothing to negotiate, really. I mean, if they know the amount, that amount is what it is. Those things are super, super important. There's in my previous firm, there's a couple of lawsuits, most of which were surrounding leasehold and disclosure of leasehold and what that amount is and when that's coming due and so forth. It's really, really important to have that in there. And again, it's just you being properly prepared. So if you're dealing with a leasehold, don't list it on the MLS until you have the leasehold information. If you have more questions about that, just talk to your broker. Public remarks, super important. This is where you get to be a little bit of an author and be a little bit of an artist and be creative as to selling your property, so to speak. One of the things that you want to make sure you avoid is exaggerating, hyperbole. You want to make sure that you don't inadvertently commit any fair housing violations. I attended a fair housing class recently, and you would be surprised as to the number of violations on that many listings have. And it's clearly not blatant. It's not meant to be harmful or directed or steering or malicious to any group, but it's just what they classify as a fair housing violation. So if the most common one is like a short walk to the beach, that you can't do that. You can say close proximity to the beach, or nearby a beach, but you can't say close walk to a beach. You can't say perfect home for a family. Can't say neighborhood is kid friendly. You can't, not that you would say this, but you can't even say like he or she. You can't even make reference to gender. That could be a fair housing violation. So the point is, you can be, creative. Don't embellish. Don't exaggerate the condition of the property or what the property is or isn't. But just stick to being as objective as possible. Kim, do you want to ask something?
So would close to schools also be a violation?
No, close proximity to a school is not. Walking distance to a school would be.
Okay, so you can kind of infer schools, meaning schools, kids.
Well, I wouldn't say like, close to a school for your growing family. I probably would not say, because that's a different, that takes it down a different path. But you can say it's nearby, or a mile away from this school or close by to this school. That in and of itself is not. Gabby brings up a good one too. I don't even know the answer to this because I don't know. Tony, what do you think? She's asking like, what if, because there's certain things that are named, right? So she says jogging paths. We're not saying jogging. It's called a jogging path. That's a pet friendly building is not a violation.
For recreation.
What'd you say?
Recreation.
A path for recreation?
Yeah, jogging. I don't see any issue with jogging path.
The good news is some of this is federal, so that you got to be careful. But Hawaii, every state adds on like their layers onto that. Hawaii is not as strict as other states. Our other states are like, you can't say master bedroom anymore. You can't say, mother-in-law suite. Like it gets very, very restrictive. It's not as restrictive here yet, but I'm just trying to at least start getting it into your brain that you have to be very cautious about what you put on there, not to inadvertently offend any person or group or anything like that, because that's obviously not what we're trying to do.
Hey, Chad.
Yes, ma'am.
There's an interesting one that side note that Jocelyn brought up, which is, we mentioned pet friendly building and you commented on that, but a huge potential for getting into trouble with violation is no animals allowed, or how you discuss, can my dog move in? Well, it really depends on whether it's a special category of assistance animal or not.
Right. Yeah. Again, that goes back to knowing the property and understanding, is it a pet friendly building in and of itself? And if it's not, then you might want to have a disclaimer that, of course, we're not saying that someone who needs a pet and has a pet that is a therapy dog or a seeing eye dog or something to that effect, we're not excluding that protected group. Julie, you asked, so walking distance would be discriminatory against individuals who can't walk. Yes, that is absolutely correct. Which is why we would say close proximity. By the way, this is not KW rules. This is just the rules in which we are all trying to follow. Okay, so agent remarks are only seen by members of the MLS, which is agents, appraisers, etc. And so these are things that you want other agents to know. This is not necessarily going on Zillow or Redfin or on High Central. If a consumer looks on that property, this is going to agents. So some of the things that you might have on there are showing instructions or scheduling instructions, such as to schedule a showing on this property, please contact showing time, or please call me at X number, or email me at this email, or whatever the thing is that you have set up. I highly recommend for you new agents to use showing time. Highly recommend that. That's just going to save you so much time on showing time, which they have classes for how to use that and set that up as well. But on showing time, you can put you can block out days. So if it's owner occupied and the owner says, I don't want it shown on this day because it's on Sundays because it's church day and family day and we don't want to be bothered on Sundays, you can block it out so no one can even schedule on that day. You can set it up so that there's auto instructions. So if somebody sets an appointment and you or the seller get that text message and they approve it, which is also great too, because the seller or tenant or whomever can approve the showing requests, then an auto email can go out. And that auto email can go out to the other agent, say, thank you, you've been approved. Make sure you park and stall number such and such and go, the lockbox is located here and do this and then that. Don't forget to do this. And there's a dog in the back. Don't pet the dog. I mean, whatever the thing is, you can set all that up in advance. and it's all automatic. And then you don't have to keep doing it on a regular basis for each showing. I know a lot of agents are a little bit set in their ways, and they'll say, "Oh, I got to be at every showing. I got to let people in," unless it's a luxury property or you're instructed to do so by the seller. Leverage, like you don't need to do those kind of things if it's not necessary to do. Sometimes you can get a little bit further along with showing the property and not physically being at the property. Again, this is assuming it's vacant, or it's okay to do that if it's a unique property where there's expensive things in there, or it's a luxury property, different scenario. But if it's a normal type of property or situation, I would say let the showing take place. You don't need to be there. Sometimes that hinders the ability for people to openly discuss if they like the property, if they want to make an offer, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to go into real quick some of the things on here. So special sales conditions is pretty self-explanatory. It's if the property is under a bankruptcy or foreclosure, or if it's a lender sale and so forth. In far majority of the cases, there's just simply going to be none. Terms acceptable. These are like, obviously cash is probably going to be on every single one. Conventional might be on most of them. Other things that are on here, don't just select everything, because one thing you want to make sure of is some agents are doing a search on the MLS. Like if they have a USDA buyer or a VA buyer, they're going to search it on terms acceptable. Hey, Emma, I wouldn't recommend doing this because, again, garbage in, garbage out, but a lot of agents do. So if they search, show me all the properties that accept VA loans. Well, if you forgot to check it, then your property is not going to show up. Likewise, you got to make sure that your property is VA approved based on condition, as well as if the association is already approved, either FHA, USDA, or VA. You can look all this stuff up to make sure that condominium or townhome or association is government approved. There's also an issue of lendability. So if a property is a tear down, it is unlikely that it can be, financed by anything other than a private money or hard money loan. And I can get into that at a different time. Possession, I would always put in there at closing, unless it's something special. But the other options are in there, but far more often it's going to be at closing. Disclosures should be all that's applicable, but certainly the property disclosure statement. Style, that's self-explanatory. You can get that information from Realist or Hawaii Information. Stories, self-explanatory. Property condition is subjective, but again, same thing before, don't exaggerate, don't embellish. This is where this shows up in the underwriting process. So if you say that it's in excellent condition and it's not, or vice versa, if you're kind of going in there and saying it's in fair condition, as new agents, if you kind of go, that's fair. Fair might not be lendable to some people. So really talk to your broker about what condition you're putting it in. You can inadvertently harm the property's marketability and value by putting in the wrong thing. Lot description, self-explanatory. Amenities is also self-explanatory. Construction, exterior finish, that can also be found on either the assessor's or a Realist site. This is self-explanatory for roofing, floor covering. If you don't know, by the way, you're filling in some of this stuff. You can leave some of this stuff blank when you physically are in the property so you can examine it, but make sure that you put the accurate thing that's in there. We have the duty of making sure that we're in the property and seeing it, touching it, seeing it, making sure that we are aware of what the property is and isn't. There's a lot of agents I speak to that have never even been in a property before, and that property is listed, and I cannot, like, I've called an agent like, hey, can you tell me more about the property? Oh, I've never even been there before. I'm like, you're killing me. Like, you have to be in the property so you can see, is there a watermark on the roof? Has there been roof issue? I mean, there's things that you got to get ahead of to understand. And part of that listing presentation to see the home is part of this process, so you can get a better idea of the condition of the property. View is also subjective. Be realistic. If you have, like, especially this in Waikiki, some of the buildings that come up, if you have a little sliver of ocean, I would not say, hey, this beautiful ocean view, because that's like, if you kind of tilt your head this way and with a close one eye, and you don't want to be overly creative on your ocean views. Topography is self-explanatory. Location is self-explanatory. Roads, self-explanatory. Parking, as well. By the way, for the parking numbers, I don't know if we got into that or not, but we always put TBD, to be determined. We don't put the actual stall numbers in there because in most cases for condos or townhomes, the stall numbers, the stalls are really owned by the association as a common area, and the numbers themselves could change. And they don't frequently do, but they could change by the association. So if we put it in there, we don't want to create a liability and say, if someone has like a fascination with number 23 and 24, and then they either move the stall number or the association renumbers them, and now you're number 16 and 17. Oh my God, that's a bad luck number for me in my culture, or we don't want to get into that. So just put TBD. Property frontage is self-explanatory. Easements is also self-explanatory and also something that you can get off of the prelim. Security, self-explanatory. Utilities available is what the seller may have or know that's available in their area. Some is self-explanatory, like if they're on public utilities, it's not a cesspool, right? It's not, or if they have electric stove, it's not gas, then you would know these things. So some of that being in the home and asking the right questions to your sellers is what you need to do to get that information. Other monthly fees include is self-explanatory. Inclusions are self-explanatory. This is really important, by the way. The inclusion portion is what is being included in the conveyance of the sale. The biggest one that I see that comes up in both inclusions and exclusions is washer, dryer, fridge. And that's just my demographic that I used to serve most often was first-time home buyers as well as military. And for whatever reason, I would have this conversation. This would come up all the time. Is especially early on in my career, I would talk to them about what the inclusions are, and they would agree, yep, this is the refrigerator and the wash and dryer is being included. And suddenly, somehow along the process, they packed up the washer, dryer, and the refrigerator. And so, if it's planned on being excluded and not conveyed in the property, you got to have that conversation, because sometimes people think that it's not a fixture, it's not like attached to the walls, so therefore it doesn't count. This is what this portion is for. You're including it or you're excluding it. You can get into a whole cost and liability issue if you don't have it properly categorized. Pool is self-explanatory. Occupancy, self-explanatory. This shows up on the MLS. It doesn't show up on public sites. So some people think that if I put vacant, I got to put owner occupied so that no one breaks into the home. That doesn't show up like that. But they should still take their own precautions. I mean, if a property is vacant and they don't have any blinds or drapes or window coverings, and you can see right through it, the people on the outside are going to see that it's vacant regardless if it's vacant or not. Showing is what kind of notice the buyer's agent needs in order to show the property. So whether you're scheduling it yourself or whether you're scheduling it through showing time will take care of this stuff for you. So if you put on there 4 hours or 30-minute minimum or whatever the thing is, showing time will take care of all the requirements. You plug it in one time and then off and running, and it's so much easier for you. If it is a tenant occupied property, you may want to plan and strategize for this. I would typically I would get permission from the property manager and the seller to have the tenant on there so that the tenant can approve the showings and make sure that they cannot make requests that are less than 48 hours so that we maintain that rule and that law. If the property is owner occupied, I always try to talk to the seller about considering and allowing showings within an 8-hour notice, or if they're at work, if we can go in anytime. Setback is self-explanatory. If you don't know, you can always put of record. This whole section here for new agents, we don't use that. So that's one less thing that you need to fill out. And on the bottom, we meaning the brokers or BIC sign, but the listing. So Tony and I were talking about, this is kind of a new thing. So we're going to say here from a compliance perspective, we would rather the listing agent initial in that little yellow box. Not us, not the broker, but you, the listing agent. And in our discussion, the thought process is you're the one that's at the property, seeing the property, filling out this form. We're not. So you should have some sort of signature, or in this case being an initial, to say that, yes, I confirm that this is the condition and this is the amenities and this is the inclusions and exclusions and so forth. So we went through a lot of stuff so far. We're almost to the finish line. We went through listing agreement. We went through MLS prop type. Here's all the, Marinda has a question. Yes, Marinda.
Hey, Chad, on dual
Hi.
variable,
Mhm.
you're talking about the difference between the amount that's agreed upon for the whole commission, and then if we were to reduce our commission. So in that little box, what is listed? Say it's a 5% listing, but I agreed with my seller that I do it for 4% if I have the buyer. So is the difference supposed to be listed as 1, or should it be disclosed as 4%?
Are you talking about, when you say disclose, are you talking about where it shows the co-op,
Yes.
so you're going to, that's not going to change. So I'm going to, let me give you this example, because I don't like the 4%. That's a terrible example. 4%.
Mhm.
Let's pretend that we're talking about 6%. So there's a 6%, and then and you're splitting it 3% each side, right? That's kind of the norm.
Yep.
But then you tell your seller, and so on your listing agreement, it's going to say 6% plus GET, and then on the bottom of that same page, it's going to say 3%, right?
Yep.
And then you'll have on there in the A10 special terms that the seller agrees that if the listing agent procures a buyer, that the total commissions will be reduced from 6% to 5% in this example. That's all that's listed in that agreement. It's in A10 by way of that verbiage. And then the dual variance is going to have the yes instead of a no, and then the percentage sign. That's all that's going to happen. You're not going to change the
Okay.
2.5% on the MLS side at all. Or
Got
sorry,
it.
the
So
3%.
3%. So in there, I feel like there's a little puka that says dual variable, yes. And then if you're doing it, what's the amount?
You don't
And
need to
then
put
that
an
shows
amount.
up
It's
on the
just asking
MLS.
There is not.
what it's asking is
Okay.
how it's being calculated. If it's being calculated by a dollar or by a percentage. So in this example, we're
Okay.
talking about a percentage. So you would just put the percent sign. You would put
Oh,
yes
okay.
and percent sign.
That
And
answers
that's
my
all
question.
that's needed. Yeah.
I was thinking it was supposed to be an amount there. Thanks for
No.
clarifying.
Yep. No problem.
Okay.
Okay. So see these 4 documents here: KW Standard Addendum, COVID, dual agency, first Hawaii title. These are the documents. So real briefly, KW Standard Addendum should go on everything, whether you're writing a purchase contract. In this case, you're taking a listing. Our Standard Addendum is very benign, meaning it doesn't alter the contract. It doesn't change rights. It doesn't remove or add contingencies. It's just disclosure based. It's saying, make sure, buyer, that you know that you should do your due diligence and you should do an inspection. Make sure that you review all the permits and the prelim, and you do a termite inspection and so forth. It's pretty benign. Then we have dual agency, we have COVID addendum, we have first Hawaii title, ABA, and a lot of agents will say, if I'm taking a listing, why do I need these other documents? How do I know if it's dual agency? And you know, if it's first Hawaii title, I'm not using first Hawaii title. I'm using first American title, for instance. These are all disclosure based. So the dual agency, the reason we included that on here is because if you notice on the exclusive right to sell agreement, the section for dual agency is so small. It's a blurb that just basically says, yes, they agree to dual agency, or no, they don't agree to dual agency. That's it. It's very, very small. And Tony and I feel that that's not enough information for a seller to really look over what their rights and obligations are, what our obligations are. So we have them basically sign the dual agency disclosure form as purely a matter of just us disclosing what dual agency is. And they're really going to have a better understanding of what their rights are and so forth. So that's why they sign it. It's not that we know that it's going to be a dual agency or not. We have no idea at that point. Same thing with first Hawaii title. First Hawaii title is the reason why we disclose it is KW has some interest in ownership in that company. So as a matter of disclosure, we have to disclose to the public that we have ownership and interest in that company, as it's broken down on there, 18.4% or whatever it is. If you say, yeah, but I'm going to be using whatever, Old Republic or First American or whatever it is, you don't know that yet. If you're just taking the listing, how do you know that you're not going to get an unbelievable cash offer from a buyer that wants to use first Hawaii title? That's number one. Number two is, it's still a matter of disclosure. We're not saying anyone needs to use it. We're saying that we have to advise the seller that we have interest in ownership in that company. And then lastly is the COVID addendum. we don't, this is in our consultation with Chemo Stone, is when you're on the buy side, you should use this form to give an added protection to your buyer for the ability to extend possibly. We recommend checking box number 1 and extending it 15, maybe 30 days, depending on what you need. But again, this is a disclosure because on the sell side, we do not recommend that. In fact, if you get an offer with this included, we recommend that you counter that out. In most cases, again, everything's case by case, depending on the client's goals and priorities. But this benefits mainly the buyer. It doesn't typically benefit the seller at all, this document. So we're not asking the seller to sign it because we intend on using it. We're asking him to sign it so that he understands that this is what's happening right now. It's very prevalent in the landscape of real estate and the offers that we're receiving, but explain to them that if you receive an offer like this, in most circumstances, you're going to try to or attempt to counter it out. Miranda, did you have another question, or was that your hand up from before?
Before.
Oh, okay. So you have all your documents signed. What do you do now? Now you got to start working on putting everything together, right? So you have all the documents together. Are you going to be staging it? Is it vacant? By the way, if you're staging it, you have options, right? You can do traditional staging, or you can do virtual staging, which is what I've kind of gone towards the last couple of years. And virtual staging is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I don't even do regular staging at all anymore. Again, it depends on your client, their expectations. Is it luxury? Is it not? All those things come into play in terms of making that decision. So you should also know what the norm is for your price point and the areas. But virtual staging can save you a ton of money, a ton of hassle as well. The photos that you're taking, hire a professional photographer. Please don't. We're not that firm that allows you to do iPhone photos with your thumb in half of the photo with you sticking out. You're in the mirror when you're taking the bathroom photo. Don't do that. Have a professional photographer do it. I have a handful of them that I use, and you can ask some of our other agents and colleagues who they use. Do you need a 3D tour? These are the things that you got to ask your photographer too, because some photographers will do all those things and drone photos. Some don't do that. So you got to understand what it is you're looking for and properly schedule some of these things. You're going to be doing open houses, any social media stuff, circle prospecting. You're going to do e-blast to your sphere of influence, ESCROW e-blasts. I don't know if you guys know what that is for new agents, but I put on the right, as you can see, there's a ton of different classes that I thought is relevant to this, which is all upcoming from High Central. And yeah, I think some of them are free. And to Kim's question, there's at least 2 of them that have CE credit on there as well. So I'm always huge on learning and being better and being more efficient about what I do. So some of these things might help you with that. So open house is always a good idea, but you got to talk to your seller about that. Are they open to that? Are they going to be available to do that? Will they have the properties cleaned and ready? Ideally, you're going to want to have maybe a week and a half advance notice on whether you're going to do an open house, because you want to be able to market it. You want to be able to do something called circle prospecting, which is when you contact or visit properties neighboring that property and let them know that you have an open house that's upcoming and you'd love to invite them, or all that kind of stuff. There's a whole series that we do on circle prospecting. You can do e-blast to ESCROW. So ESCROW will do this for free. So if you are a brand new agent, create a relationship with an ESCROW officer, ESCROW company. If you need some help with that, let me know and I'll point you in the right direction. But they'll do an e-blast for free. And if their database of agents consists typically of 2,000 or 3,000 agents on island, they'll do an e-blast for you for free to market your open house, or market a new listing, or market a price reduction, or whatever it is that you're looking to do. But you should absolutely lean in heavily to marketing. Don't be that agent that just puts a sign out front, puts it on the MLS, and then hopes that you get just a ton of offers. This kind of market, where it's a hot seller's market, can sometimes create bad habits in good agents. A good agent needs to actively market and sell that property. And one of the theories that I've always had is, even if I've gone into ESCROW, I still market it. I still market it to the day I close. So, and the reason is I want to have a backup and a backup to the backup and so on and so forth. So you're live on the MLS. You can either choose it going coming soon. You can choose it being active. Coming soon has a maximum of 30 days and then it automatically is withdrawn unless you convert it to an active listing. Why would you want to go coming soon versus active? Maybe the property's not entirely ready. Maybe you took exterior photos, but they're doing some renovations or updating, or maybe they're in the process of moving out. So they're not, the property itself is not vacant and readily available to show. So you go coming soon. And what coming soon allows you to do is by placing it either in coming soon or active status, you can then put a sign out front on the property. You can market it on social media. You can do e-blasts and so forth. But if the property is not on coming soon or not on active, you can't do any of those things. You don't have the right per the MLS to market and disseminate this information. So it's really important to understand that. Coming soon does not go to the public. It only goes to agents. So on the MLS, it won't show up to it won't go to Zillow. It won't go to Redfin on coming soon. It'll just be on High Central to other licensed agents. Whereas active will go to everyone. There's that IDX push that goes out. You'll have the agreement. Fully executed agreement. Fully executed means that the seller has signed it as well as the BIC, as well as per our new policy, you have initialed it, right? And so it's fully executed. You have to do something within 4 days. So what is that something? You got to put it in coming soon. You got to put it in active. You have to do something with it unless the A10 of the listing agreement says otherwise. Upload it to the MLS. We have a service that we're developing, so it should be out probably in the next couple of weeks where we can help you with all the uploads, listing packets. And Tony's working on helping to organize the listing presentation side of it. And we're also having upload to MLS side of it and contract writing side of it. It's amazing. So we're going to have some great services to help you guys leverage a little bit. It is just FYI. So Lisa Crosby Torres doesn't freak out too much, rightfully so, it is only available to agents that have graduated her program. So if you are in coaching, some of these leverage services will be available when you graduate, but we need to really show you how these things work and why it's important first before we start leveraging and offloading this, right, Lisa? I see you unmuting yourself.
Yeah, and but the bigger thing is I'm getting some text messages on the side because I require that listing paperwork be signed before it's given to the seller, because if you're new, you can make huge mistakes that then you have to go back to your seller. So we want to, there may be cases where I tell you, if I'm your BIC, it's fine, go get it signed and then I'll sign after, but I want to pre-approve it just to make sure there's no mistakes.
Yeah.
So could you clarify that piece? Because I'm getting some texts on that about the timing of the BIC signing on a listing and on a property data.
Yeah. So that's up to the BIC itself. So if you're in the coaching program with Lisa, follow her lead or follow whoever your coach's lead is. And that's the rules and parameters that she sets, and rightfully so. That's totally understandable. But if you're a more experienced agent, you can send me or Tony the listing agreement if we're comfortable with you doing so, signed by the seller. We'll review it and sign it afterwards. It's newer agents are a little bit different. We just want to make sure that you understand what you're putting in there and what everything means, and maybe you have some pertinent data that's missing. That's the reason why. So Lisa's 100% right in that.
Since I'm with Jerry, that doesn't really apply, right? Because everything goes through the team.
Yeah, your team leader, in this case being Jerry, will help you with all that.
Okay.
Yeah. As Jerry's calling me right now, which he should be, I'm going to text him right now. Why aren't you in this Zoom right now?
He called me
Chad,
too.
Hey, Chad. So
Yes.
clarifying too, it runs through your team, but if you're still in coaching,
Is Kim, well, so I will say this is if you do listings and you're on a team, you still have to go through your coach and your BIC's rules. However, many rainmakers or many team leaders on a team, they meaning the rainmaker is the one that controls the listings. So that's why it probably wouldn't show up in coaching. If you're on a team that allows you to do listings, then absolutely follow the guideline of your BIC, your coach. So as an example, Kim, I'm just making this up. This is an example. Kim, if you're in coaching and Lisa's your coach, she is your supervisor. She's the one that's going to give you direction as to what to or not to do and how the format looks like and so forth. If however you are if you're a buyer's agent and that's all you're focusing on is buy side, and Jerry's on the list side, Jerry would deal with whoever his broker or BIC is. That makes sense. So on this, one of the things that if you get nothing else from the listing side, if you're already doing active listings, please use this. This is something that I've been using for years. This is just a template. I can send you this template. Absolutely send out on a weekly basis a weekly report to your sellers. And here's the reason why is in a hot market, it's kind of meaningless, meaning that properties sometimes get offers so quickly and so many of them, and everyone's competing with one another and so forth. But as listing agents, as realtors, like I mentioned before, as a hot market can give good agents create bad habits. When the market softens or starts to slow down, which it did prior to the whole COVID boom kind of thing, it started to slow down a little bit. And when it did, a lot of sellers will think, hey, what is my agent doing? It's been on the market for 15 days. I haven't heard a thing. I don't have any showings. I don't have any offers. And I don't know why, but sellers automatically think that you as a real estate agent is sitting on the beach, sipping margaritas, not working, not doing anything at all. They have no clue what's happening behind the scenes. By the way, I think some of you absolutely are doing that. But nonetheless, we want to send out a weekly report. So I created this report. That photo in the background, you can take a photo of the property and put that in the background, have a custom report on there, put the days of when this report is reflective. The things that I put on that report is the listing date, what that current price is. This report, that the snapshot that you see on there is coming from showing time. So all the requests that we get of showings through showing time, that's the other reason why I like to use showing time, because it's just a report that you can just auto populate and download here. So I put that information in there so they can see on a weekly basis all the things. It looks like all the things that you're doing. It is all the things that you're doing, right? Then there's feedback. I always tell the seller in a listing presentation too, it doesn't matter what I think about the property. It doesn't matter also what really you think about the property. It comes down to if we're opening the property up to the public, it matters really what the market says that they're willing to pay and some of the feedback. And I share this with them for sake of feedback. It can come from by way of open house, or in this case, it can come by the feedback report from showing time. And I share that with them. And this is super helpful if everyone says not interested, not interested, not interested because the price is too high. It's not you saying the price is high. It's the market saying the price is high. Or if they say, there's a funny smell coming from this one room, and then because she told you this in the listing presentation that the dog peed in that one room. Well, maybe it's time to get that fixed or change the carpet or whatever, especially if you have 10 out of 11 people saying, what's that smell in that one room? It's not you saying it. It's coming from the feedback report as an example. Also MLS updates. I put in here the client screenshot of the property and what's on there, but to the right of that is something that's far more powerful, which is the hit counter report. The hit counter is, you can find that on the MLS. And it's really powerful, especially if you're going to talk about, and again, it might not be the market right now, but I'm setting you up for success, which is coming down the pike, which is when the market softens and slows down a little bit, having conversations about price reductions is a tough conversation to have sometimes. Having that conversation when you do a weekly report and also shows the hit counters makes that conversation much, much easier. Because I'll give you an example. Let's say that this property has been on the market for 30 days. And let's pretend that 30 days is a long time for it to be sitting on the market. If we're looking at client portals and it says 100 and the amount of views is 80, and you're kind of comparing it to other properties and it seems like that's really low, well, then a couple of things are happening. Either the photos aren't good, or more than likely the property is priced too high. But when you lower the price, those numbers should change. And so that's how you can kind of really fine tune that sweet spot of the right exposure. Because as you start to have a price reduction, if I go from 500 to 499, that's not enough to make a significant difference. But if I went from 500 to 480, that number of client portals should go up by anywhere between 20 to 35%, and so on and so forth. And the larger those numbers go, the more exposure you have, and the more possible buyers will show up. So that conversation or these reports help lead to a successful conversation. Yes, Kim.
So if you do a price reduction, do you have to fill out that listing price form again, or?
That's a great question. You would just use an MLS change form. There's a document called the MLS change form. It's found in Zipforms, and you can make changes to what's showing up on the MLS. Sometimes it's just a simple price change. Sometimes it's wording. Sometimes it's you're maybe resetting and removing it from the market. You're going to go back on market in a month from now, whatever the case is. So in most cases, the MLS change form can accomplish that. But there are some exceptions where you might need an amendment to the listing agreement, or sometimes you might need a brand new agreement. So it kind of depends. For that question with regards to price, though, it's just the MLS change form.
I have one more.
Mhm.
So what if your strategy is to price it lower so you get more people coming through and a lot of, but you're basically trying to market it better by pricing it slightly lower compared to another place, so you get more people interested? How does that affect the listing price then?
So this is a tricky conversation. The way that I would answer it, and I would love for Lisa and or Tony to give their thoughts too, because we have so much experienced brokers with us. But here, my 2 cents is, I'm not opposed to that kind of marketing. I don't do that kind of marketing myself. The reason why is I have that conversation with the seller, and I explain to them. I'll give you an example. If the seller says, hey, I think my home is worth 800, and I pull up comps and I go, yeah, I would agree that it's probably worth about 800. Where do you want to price it at? If my client was okay with selling or listing it at 700, which is clearly priced under market value with the intention of having more exposure, with the possibility of having, more offers competing with one another, it is our duty and our obligation to also explain the risks. Okay, Mr. Seller, I totally understand. And that has been a successful strategy for many years for many agents. However, I do have to warn you of one thing. What if we list it at 700 and we have one offer at 700? Are you willing to accept that? Or are we going to pass on that offer? Or how would you, because I want to get them thinking as to what that looks like if there's egg on our face, if it doesn't work out as planned. But there are teams and agents with us that use that method to a high success. So, and then that's okay, so long as you're explaining what that risk looks like if you market it in that way. Lisa or Tony, what do you guys think? Do you guys market it like that, or do you have any feelings for or against it?
Tony, you want to go first, or you want me to?
I just normally, tell the seller that, if you price it at current market or a little bit below, you would generate a lot more activity. But I would recommend doing like a 20 or 30% price reduction right off the bat, because then you, like you said, you would only get one offer and you kind of stuck with that price.
What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, so, I think there's 3 answers to this. And I love my friend from California because some of this comes from that experience, right? We've seen agents that grossly underprice to try to get like 100 offers. That's a strategy that happened in California. And I'm going to throw that out because I think that's just a stupid strategy. I think it's a violation of the code of ethics. I think it's a violation of a lot of things. And it's just not a smart strategy. You've got to be, if you're going to underprice a little bit, you still have to be in the price band where your target market is searching. So if you underprice it and you miss the price band that your target buyer is in, you're invisible. You're hoping that the agents are seeing all the properties. So a grossly underpricing rarely works as a strategy, except in very few markets. But I think you've got to look at what the client looks at as well. Is there's a clause of the contract that says that the seller could owe a commission, actually says they do owe a commission, if the buyer produces, or if the agent produces a ready, willing, and able buyer at the price in the listing agreement. So I think if you and the seller have agreed upon that strategy from an honorability point, you also need to put some language in there that you understand that this property is being priced low intentionally, and the broker will not be paid a commission if the best offer is only at list price. So I think your clients are going to want to have that discussion with you from a trickery standpoint. But then otherwise, every market is a little bit different. Every property is a little bit different. So I think you've really got to understand the strategy piece of this and know by how much are you underpricing and what is your objective.
Yep.
You know, so the market of today may be very different tomorrow, and you could underprice, and that your only offer is that property. So I agree with Tony. The market we're in right now, you price at what you believe is current market value, not where you think it will sell in a week. So yeah, technically, I guess that's not market value. You're pricing it at really near the past comps would be underpricing in most of the price bands or area bands in this market right now, hoping it'll carry it up. If your market is trailing down, you're going to have to price under the last sales. And we may end up in that market at some point. We will end up in that market at some point in the future. It's just when that happens.
When the market softens, there's a term that we typically will use is pricing ahead of the market. So at the end of the day, you have to be an expert and really know what's going on in your marketplace. But the theme that both Lisa, Tony, and I keep reiterating is we have to understand what the client's goals and priorities are as well. You shouldn't kind of force fit your marketing strategy for every single property, every single home, every single location of that home, because they're all different. They're all going to have moving parts. So, and that's why you should have a good coach or a good broker to help kind of guide you a little bit. So nonetheless, the MLS updates I put in here, the hit counter information you would put in here, advertise a property. So if you're doing Facebook ads or Instagram ads or anything else that you want to do, this happens to be the paid ads. And I just use this as an example, but this helps to show that you're trying to expose the property for them and have as many eyeballs on the property as possible. So I would do a screenshot of what that ad looks like, showing it on Facebook. And then to the right of that, which is great because it gives you this information instantly, which is the impressions, the clicks, and the leads that have come through as of that. So as a result of those leads or those advertisements that you did. The beauty behind it is you also get those leads. So if you're the one that ran those ads, you now have potential buyers that you can go after as well for this property or for any other property. But I think that from a seller's perspective, if I see that you're advertising and you're spending money, they don't know what you spent. That actually this is very nominal cost. But if they see all the impressions and clicks and so forth, it shows that you're really working for them. Email campaign. So this can be done via Smart Plan, via MailChimp, or this can be done via your the escrow officer sending those e-blasts for you. So Just Listed is a perfect example of one that just came out. You can have open house this Sunday is another one, or if you have a price reduction. To me, a price reduction means that you're marketing all over again. And that's not a bad thing. It's like you would just do a whole new campaign, which is just reduced, or your Facebook ad, just lower the price to whatever it is. That's exciting because those are all things that you can get more people on board with and again, add to your weekly report. So this is just an example of a report that I've used for years. I've already had a number of text messages from you guys asking for that. Yes, absolutely. I'll make that available for you. And guys, that's it. So I wasn't that bad, right? How long did we go? It was 2 hours. Well, I tried to make it as short as possible. Any questions that you guys have for me, for Lisa, for Tony, feel free to ask. Let me know. Any ahas, any takeaways, anything that we should cover next time that we didn't cover this time? Nothing at all?
Hi, Chad, it's Jocelyn.
Hi.
I have a question.
Sure.
What do you do with objections to dual agency when they don't want to agree to dual agency?
Do they, is there a specific thing that they said they didn't want because of dual agency as a result of dual agency?
That's still unclear at this time.
Chad, let me add in a little insight. This is a beneficiary. It's a probate sale, and we have a professional entity handling the seller side, and that's part of their requirement, and they're from the state of Washington.
That's a requirement not to have dual agency?
It's a requirement of their addendum to a listing contract. It's how they deal with all of their probate sales.
So, okay. So that's a different thing altogether then, right? So in a normal scenario though, just an equity sale from someone that is questioning, I've never had that issue where I've had that come up, but I've always been able to get around it, which is, I would say that, KW is one of the largest real estate firms on island and the largest on the planet. And one thing that we don't want to do is limit our exposure to the property. So Mr. Seller, you would agree that the more eyeballs that we have on the property, the more opportunity that we have for potential buyers and offers and so forth. So one thing we wouldn't want to do is limit our exposure, because I want my slice of pie to be as large as possible for as many eyeballs to see it. The moment that we basically say, you know, to one of the largest firms on the planet that we don't want to do dual agency, which is fine, and I'll absolutely help you in that, we immediately go from this exposure to potentially this exposure, because we limit the amount of offers or exposure that we can get on the property. And then I specifically go through what the dual agency really means, because in many cases, they may not know what that looks like. So then I start to explain things like, for me personally, I've only done, maybe 2 or 3 dual agency in my career whereby I represented both the buyer and seller. And that's typically what a seller is challenging in my experience. What they don't mind is if another agent with KW is representing the buyer. That's a different thing in their mind. So the clarification part of it is really important to find out what their concern is. So then if I said, now KW, as large as we are, we have 350, 360 agents at KW in our office here. But Mr. Seller, would you mind if it was Brooke who brought in the buyer? I don't know who the buyer is, never met them before. So Brooke would represent the buyer, and I would represent you. So I don't even know what their goals or priorities are or what they're doing. I've never met them before, but would that be something you're opposed to? So when you explain it and kind of get a better understanding and educate them a little bit, and also go through the dual agency and read out what the rights, obligations, and limitations are, I found that to be very helpful in navigating your way through that dual agency. Tony also pointed out too that in coming down the pike, right, Tony, with forms and what have you, there's going to be a different form of, not dual agency, what is it referred to as?
Designated agency,
which I'm in theory, I'm kind of excited about it. I think the form in and of itself is a little bit cumbersome, but that might be potentially, there's some hope, I think, in how we can navigate that better. Anything else you want to add on that, Lisa or Tony, for the dual agency?
No, not for me.
Thank you, Chad.
Sure, no problem. Stephanie.
Hey, you guys may not know this, but going back to the HARPTA tax, is the 8 whatever percent held, and it may not necessarily be that much? That's just what's held, and then it's figured out later as far as how much you actually get taxed?
Yes, it's not a fee or a tax. It's deemed as a withholding. So in my experience, I've seen it all over the place, whereby it's withheld and then some of it is released. I've seen, none of it released. So then it comes down to the individual and their conversation that they're going to be having directly with the Department of Taxation. But what you can't get around easily, at least, is the actual withholding. The initial withholding is 8.25% of the total amount. And when you're talking, especially with maybe like military, in the example that I gave, or someone who's only been here for, under 5 or 6 years, sometimes the fees, the commissions, and that 8.25%, they're already upside down. Like that's why that net sheet is impactful when you're presenting it, because that might remove their possible desire. And I'm not trying to trick someone into one category or another, but if we're looking to educate, that is part of the equation. So if you prepare a net sheet that says, this is what it looks like if you sold today, this is what it looks like if you converted this into an investment property and you're not a resident of Hawaii, this is what it could look like, in however many years that you don't occupy the property. Again, confirm that with your CPA, Mr. Seller, but it's going to be a vastly different amount of proceeds. And that's a good way to have that conversation with them.
Do you know what amount that is going to be held or released is dependent on the state, like in which they're currently in, or you don't have? Yeah.
Every situation I've dealt with that has been lowered or reduced from that amount is, I don't know the math behind it, but I do know that all of them required their CPA to submit information. And I don't know if that information just means a letter from the CPA or partially their taxes or their estimated taxes or whatever. So in my experience, every single one of them required the intervention of that seller's CPA. It's not an easy process, and some of them are just flat out denied. So I don't want anyone to think that, oh, if I have a seller, the 8.25% can easily be reduced, because it's not supposed to be. It's a withholding of 8.25%. But I have seen it reduced with certain documentation supporting that.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, Tony.
There is, unless the rules have changed, there is a form that a CPA can submit to the state of Hawaii, and the CPA will prepare it to show what the actual gain is. In most cases, what the actual gain is will be paid to the state at closing, forego the withholding. And if there's anything that's owed, or owed to the seller or owed to the state, that will be taken care of when the seller goes into the files their taxes.
Hey, I think there's another addition to this, and what I'm hearing in Stephanie's comment too. So thank you, Tony, because I was listening to that too. So Stephanie, the HARPTA has to do with taxes owed to the state of Hawaii for gain. It has nothing to do with their federal income taxes. However, there is a law that created these states creating these laws called the Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act, FIRPTA. So if your client is also a foreign investor, they could have withholding on a federal level. And the way they would clear that is either the federal government would keep it if they never file a tax return, or they'd file a US tax return. In the state of Hawaii, that the state keeps what's withheld, they reduce it in escrow, or they file a Hawaii tax return and they're going to pay less or more. And usually it's probably less.
Okay, thank you so much.
Chloe, you had a question?
Hi, yes, everybody. Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so let's say you have a listing and the seller is willing to include furnishings like couches, decorations in the sale. However, it's depending on the price that they agree on. So if it's less than the listing price and they're not happy with it, they don't want to let go of some of that furniture. How would you describe that on the MLS? Would you put in the descriptions or the agent description? Or would you just wait to discuss it with potential offers that you get?
Is this a condo tell, or would this be like a typical townhome single family?
I've had 2 listings before where they were just condo sales, and the people purchasing them were going to occupy it, not have it as a Airbnb or anything like that. So, but my seller did kind of flip the home and purchase furniture as the staging as well. But because of the market when we had it on, they wanted the option to sell the furniture if they didn't get the price they wanted for the condo.
That's a little, here's a tricky part that I'm hearing is, if the potential buyer has financing, that could throw off appraisal and that kind of thing. So you have to be cautious about what's included.
Right.
And you can negotiate that while in escrow, so long as it's not, there's a section in the purchase contract where you include furnishings, and you can put on there that you're going to have submitted what furnishings are included depending on the price received. That's one thing. But a lot of lenders, if they see that check, they're going to want to ensure that there's no value, there's no tangible value to the furniture, which is moot if you're selling it for a certain price, and a price agreeable by both parties, especially the seller. But if there is value to the furniture, that's going to absolutely throw off the appraised value, especially when it comes to like a VA loan or something like that. So it's a little tricky on how you, and that's why I was asking if it's a condo tell or a regular sale or what have you. But I would absolutely just put in there that some of the furnishings you can negotiate that, while in escrow, and then maybe take the lead while you're in escrow, take the lead from the lender as how that should be drafted, not to throw something off. The last thing that you want to do is kill the escrow because of that.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Uni.
I have an aha and a question.
Sure.
It's the dual variable comp was an aha, but my question is hypothetically, if say the buyer was also the listing agent, and of course, if the requirements were satisfied, the seller signs the agreement contract in case the listing agent, him or herself, is the buyer. And I know this is like strongly discouraged by the company, but if that was the case, would this dual variable comp be a thing still?
So make sure I understand. So the listing agent decides that he wants to be he wants to buy the listing from his client.
Right.
No, it wouldn't. That's a disclosure issue. It wouldn't be a dual variable thing unless that dual variable condition is part of the agreement. Like, do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
You know what always happens on these, Chad? I know some backstory. I always know some backstory.
Yeah, what's the backstory?
You know, and that's the thing when you ask questions, right? You're either asking general questions or you're asking a question for a specific situation you have. And so it's important to ask, you know, because you can ask a general question and get the wrong answer.
Yeah, and I don't want to give, by the way, Lisa's right on this, is as your coach or your BIC, make sure that you ask the specific questions to them because they have the background information. I'm literally answering very vague questions because I don't know the background. So hopefully none of you are going to go to Lisa later and go, what Chad said. Chad didn't say anything. I promise
I'll
you
tell you
I
this.
understand.
So I'll tell you this is that I've seen a huge lawsuit over a listing agent buying their listing. Because the seller can say you undermarketed the price, you told me a low price, you didn't expose it to the market. So you also cannot have a fiduciary duty to a seller when you are the buyer. It's legally impossible to give somebody else a duty higher than that which you have to yourself. I mean, it's just, I can't see how you argue that. So you would have to buy it in a different legal status. We'd want to make sure that our principal broker is involved if it's one of our agents. But let's go to the bigger picture. If you are the listing agent on a property, we really want to make sure that you're advising the seller that they should expose the property to the market first before you make an offer on the property. Otherwise, you need to assert to them that, hey, I'm not acting as an agent here. I'm acting as a buyer and I don't have a fiduciary responsibility to you, because now our duties are in conflict with one another. So really, you have to look at the facts of the situation. I think you're in a very safe position if you put the property on the market. It's been out there for 30 or 40 days, and that time frame is longer than the average DOM. And then you come back to the seller and say, hey, look, it's not selling, and I know you really want to get it sold. I will buy it from you for this. But if you're trying to buy it before it ever goes to market, you have some potential concerns here. And Tony, now that may cause you to chime in, or Chad.
No, that makes sense. I agree.
No, I agree with you, Lisa.
All right, guys. Any other questions or comments or anything? Anyone? All right. Thank you so much for taking the morning and spending time with me. Matt Wong, he has a link that I think he's thrown in there a couple of times. Matt, I'll ask you to do it one more time. I see his post on there. Donate, maybe volunteer, maybe just write on the Kudo board. I think you can do a video. I'm going to do a video for you later,
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes, please. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and drop this link again. It is to the Kudo board to send our aloha and mahalos to our healthcare workers at Queens West Medical Center. Really right now, no donations needed at this time. It's really just sending the aloha to them and just kind of uplifting their spirits during these really, really tough times. So please, please, please just take a quick moment to go ahead and write on that Kudo board. Again, for some reason I can't type on this, but I'm going to go ahead and drop this link, and then Chad, if we can go ahead and figure out how to disseminate this through our the internet and all that stuff, we can do that too eventually.
Yeah, we sure will.
Yes.
Don't. I try to copy your link and it copied this Zoom link, so I apologize for that. Just
for some
use
reason I
his.
can't copy links
But
either,
I'll
so.
send out the slides. I'll send out the weekly report as well as this link to Maddie's cause as well. And guys, love your feedback. Let me know if it's a good class, if we should add things to it, change things around. We just want to make sure we add value to you guys. So thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.